Hi everyone, I'm Mesut, and today I will try to briefly summarize our paper within 7 minutes, and hopefully some of you will be interested enough to go and read the full paper. I want to start with giving you a little bit of context. So Jobindex is Denmark's largest job portal, and one of the services provided at Jobindex is human recruiters on behalf of companies go and search Jobindex CV database manually to find relevant candidates for vacancies and then send them contact messages. So to support these recruiters but not replace them, we developed a candidate recommendation algorithm. So I'm not going into details of this algorithm, but this is the scenario which is the focus of this talk. So in such a scenario, there are multiple stakeholders. The core stakeholders are job seekers who are providing their CVs to be recommended by the algorithm. There are recruiters who are consuming these recommended CVs, and companies who are impacted by the choices the recruiters make, but they do not directly receive the recommendations. So this study is a part of a project called Fair Match. So in this project, we first wanted to interview these core stakeholders, job seekers, recruiters, company representative. And then our goal was to using this interview transcript and get some insights from them, and then use this insight to map to the existing fairness definitions and metrics in the literature. And then after that, we are planning to develop fairness dashboards to show how these metrics are changing through time, maybe for internal or external auditing purposes. And ultimately, we are planning to develop fairness-aware candidate recommendation algorithm to support recruiters in such a manual task. This talk is about the first two parts. So I want to focus on a little bit on why we need qualitative research or participatory approach in fairness RecSys. Because usually earlier research attempts to fully account for fairness only through mathematical modeling or quantitative objectives, and this is also known as formalism trap. However, fairness is complex and a multifaceted concept that cannot be captured only quantitatively. And we believe that it is essential to also take into account qualitative fairness objectives through a more holistic understanding of the systems and their stakeholders. So to be able to include our stakeholders and create a mapping from their understanding to the fairness metrics, we interviewed recruiters, job seekers, and company representatives in the study. So the goal of these interviews were first to explore our participants' lived experiences with unfairness, and then map the insights that we get from these interviews to the existing categories of fairness metrics from the literature. So we asked them what does fairness in algorithmic hiring mean to them, and then we share with them our own definition, and then we asked them to provide examples of unfair situation based on their own experience. And then we got their feedback on some hypothetical scenarios of unfairness in this domain. And finally, we had brainstorming session on how we could and should measure fairness. Because of the time limitation, I jumped to some of the key findings we get, basically the signals that we get from this interviews to measure fairness. Majority of our participants focused on being qualified. What does it mean? They say that, okay, all the contacted or recommended candidates should be qualified, then we should look at other signals to measure fairness. So the idea was using being qualified as a precondition to measure fairness. And then another commonly mentioned signal was looking at the distribution of the qualified candidates. So the idea is to compare the distribution of, for example, shortlisted, contacted, or recommended candidates to the available pool of job seekers in the CV database. And then maybe not surprisingly, there was a lot of participants that focusing on using diversity as a way to measure fairness. And then, of course, we saw in the previous presentation as well, coverage can be used. And some of them, they were saying that we will just look at the percentage of available job seekers that are being contacted by recruiters or recommended by the algorithm. And then finally, some of our participants focused on fairness from the company's perspective. So the idea was there's this small, medium enterprises and large enterprises. Basically, are we recommending a comparable number of candidates for this different type or groups of companies or contacting them. So when we map the signals that I just summarized to the metrics, the emerging metric was a variant of demographic parity or disparity, which aims to measure the equal acceptance rate across groups in any strata. For our domain, even though we still want to recruit the most skilled candidates for jobs, it requires the decision-making, it can be recommending, shortlisting, or contacting, to be independent of the candidate's personal or sensitive information like age, gender identity, but conditional on being qualified. There are other fairness metrics, but I will just, I guess, skip because of the time limitation. I just mentioned the coverage as a way, right? There is a metric called qualification fairness, and also from the company's perspective, another metric is called company parity, basically. But there are some challenges and the limitations of our work. The challenge is, for example, at Jobindex in 2021, because of the GDPR, when a new user was registering to their system, they stopped asking them about their date of birth or gender identity. But when we want to measure this fairness metrics, especially the group fairness metrics, right, we need to have access to this information. So what we are doing, unfortunately, we have to predict this information by using proxies. So I guess that is the biggest challenge now, because we are now planning to develop some fairness dashboards for these metrics. And then some of the limitation is the, unfortunately, lack of diversity in the sample of recruited job seekers and companies. We were not able to convince enough number of, let's say, companies and job seekers to get their feedback on this. And then finally, the findings are country, culture, and domain specific, which is like generalizability is another limitation. So what are we doing now after this paper has been accepted? We are actually using these metrics to develop fairness dashboards, especially first for internal auditing at Jobindex, and when needed for external auditing purposes. And that is it. I guess I finished super early. If you have questions, I will try to answer them. Thank you.
Hi, thanks so much. Really interesting talk. The question I had was whether you can measure fairness across and within job seekers or domains or like companies even. So I imagine you can have a fairness score across kind of all the recommendations you ever made versus a fairness score for the recommendations you made to a specific, let's say, company or a specific domain or application.
So first of all, this is based on the recommending candidates to jobs, right? Mainly we did that, but when we are, for example, now we are developing this fairness dashboards, we plan to show overall, for example, fairness metric, and then divide it between, it can be, I don't know, type of the job or type of company. So to see, because when we only report one single metric, that's not really meaningful. We want to see how it differs. You know, some type of jobs are gender dominated, right? We want to see how it is there, and the other way around. I hope that answers your questions. Yeah.
So you said the next step is to develop now this, so to put it more into practice and to, can you elaborate a bit?
Like I said, we now actually build this fairness dashboards. And then the idea is after that to develop fairness-aware recommender algorithms and then use them as supporting tools for these human recruiters. That is the next step.